Hey, what's up guys? This is Brian from Whisper Status 74, and this video is going to be on the Rtings review of the Sony 800G. Now, for those of you that are new to the channel, my name is Brian. A lot of times we'll do follow-ups to these written reviews or even videos from other professional calibrated reviews, and it's basically a discussion-based overview. We go through it a little bit deeper, and we typically don't do displays at this level, but we really should. And I want to illustrate a few things here, mainly between brand loyalty. What I mean by that is, for those of you that don't really do crazy research, maybe you're looking up things really quickly, which isn't the majority of you, by the way, is we've talked about looking at the TCLs, the Vizios, and even the Hisense, and at last minute perhaps switching over and grabbing a Sony, as it might be right next to it at, say, a BJ's or a Costco. And I wanted to cover this review simply because a lot of the features that are found in obviously the higher end Sonys are not present, and that's fine. The problem though is they're also not even, I guess my point is, they're evident in the TCLs of the same price. And we look at the TCL 6 series being $1,000 or $1,200, and you're comparing that to a Sony 950G. Well, price-wise, the 75-inch 800G is more expensive than the TCL. And I kind of want to illustrate that pretty quickly. So, I wouldn't say pretty quickly, but we're going to go through it. So when we look at these numbers, a lot of people get really caught up in these numbers here, as far as 6, 8, whatever, and they kind of really live and die by these numbers. Yes, they're good indicators, but I like to look at the features that it doesn't have. Now, if you have this display, you know, this isn't killing it. All I'm trying to illustrate is, if you're going to go with these mid brands, or this is actually an entry-level brand, which is interesting because it's the same price as the TCL, is I want you to keep in mind a lot of the features that aren't present in comparison to a flagship TCL, and why I would have you get a TCL or a Hisense more than I would, you know, a low to mid Samsung. Design, you guys are interested in that, you know. I could care less about the design. They are, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of the newer LEDs all look pretty similar. Now we look here, Sony 800G delivers decent overall picture quality. Like most IPS TVs, it can't display deep blacks in a dark room. Wide viewing angles, great for a wide seating area. It has good peak brightness for watching SDR and very good reflection handling. Now you listen to those two things, wide viewing angle, reflection handling. Those are, I guess, important, but you have to really read between the lines and what's really important. It can't display deep blacks in the dark room, but it has a wide viewing angle. Things like that. This display can display a wide color gamut, though, which is great. You know, decent gray uniformity. You know, a lot of things about screen uniformity, but this is where we got to pay a little more attention here. No local dimming. And we talk about the TCL and Hisense and some of these other ones at their, or even the M series Vizios, the TVs that are actually cheaper than these TVs, that have full array local dimming. They have Dolby Vision. They have low input lag. They have the features that step-up models do. Now, this goes for Samsung at this level, Sony at this level, LG at this level. And what we're trying to illustrate here is, I love Sony, I love Samsung, I love all the brands, but when you go for this level, that's where your TCLs and your Vizios kind of come in. That's where, you know, when I see a couple or an old couple in Costco and they immediately just grab the Samsung, well, I'm sure they don't care about gaming, but they immediately run right over and grab the Sony because they've watched Sonys their whole life. You know, peak brightness, things like that are not really bright enough to enjoy. There we go. And this is interesting here. Decent HDR peak brightness, but bright highlights in some scenes don't stand out as much, as they aren't bright as they should be. Like in SDR, the 800G is slightly brighter than the 750F, but not as bright as the TV it replaced. So why is that information important? Well, I mean, their numbers aren't always super accurate because they're per every display. And for those of you worried about the OLED review, they're doing a Q&A, and you guys can question them on that live. But the point I'd like to make here is that if you're somebody who upgrades from one year to the next, this goes for any display. This is why we wait for numbers from websites like this. And Vincent is, why would I want a display not as bright as the one I'm replacing? Even if it's a few hundred nits. That could be to limit blooming, things of that nature. And we move on. Gray uniformity. These are things we want to pay attention to with some screen uniformity issues. But that's, again, you know, by basis of different models. You know, black uniformity. Here we go. Guys, this to me is one of the most important of all, because this is what you'll see with TVs having HDR now. What you'll end up seeing is the clouding and blooming. This will take you completely out of it. Disappointing black uniformity. There is noticeable clouding around our test cross, which is all through here. But you see how patchy all of that is, covering almost the entire screen. There is no local dimming feature. Now guys, please keep in mind, I'm not looking to kill this display. What I'm just trying to illustrate is that a TV of the same price from these other brands has full array local dimming. It has all of the higher end specs. So when we say I'd much rather have you go for a flagship mid-range brand than a low-range high-end brand, if that makes sense. Upscaling. A lot of times these displays do totally fine with upscaling because they're just kind of pixel for pixel. 720p, 1080p, that's fine. Color gamut, yes. Not great color volume. And as we head down, gradients, there is noticeable banding. Let's get down. No burn-in, obviously. Decent motion. So things like your pixel response. We'll talk about this here real quick, the response time. So we see motion, good overall motion, response time. It's, again, not just the numbers, it's just reading a little bit. The 800G has great response time, but some transitions show some overshoot, which can cause inverse ghosting, which can be especially noticeable in dark scenes. Those are your gaming issues, where you will see blur, which is tough. Black frame insertion, that's if you wanted to add that. It used to be called clear mode. These are for higher end displays. Now, what I want to show you guys, sound. Most of them don't have great sound. Smart features. Hold up. Let's go back up. I went too far. So color gamut. There's a wider color gamut, but you're talking about like a quantum M series, you know, quantum dot at that price point. That's where the stuff has that value. Oh, sorry. Like the majority of IPS TVs, IPS panel, which a lot of the cheaper ones are, the 800G has mediocre contrast ratio. This isn't very noticeable in a bright room, but when watching in a dark room, blacks appear gray. There is no local dimming. Now again, these displays, the reason you see them also in a lot of hotels and things of that nature is because they are always in a bright room. Even in at night or whatever, a hotel lobby will always be bright. So when you see like TVs of this nature in a gym, a lot of Samsung TVs are in my local gym, they look pretty crisp because they're far away. And you almost say, well, if that thing was free, I'll take it. You know, I'll bring that one home. That's great. But a lot of the TVs look this way. This doesn't look much different than the highest end display, to be honest. But these are the things that I focus mostly on. Local dimming, native contrast, you know, SDR peak brightness. Now, again, we talk about peak brightness not always mattering, but you do need to have it somewhere in the realm for HDR. Meaning, you know, probably over 400, 500 nits, probably minimum, to really enjoy HDR or even see it. So a lot of times you'll see HDR on the box and you're thinking, oh, well, it's got HDR. I don't love it's not as bright as last year's model. Now there is also, I believe, an 850G, but I do know these are available at your Costco's and things of that nature. And a lot of you guys do end up, if you're looking for these displays, you tend to go with the name you know, which I understand completely. But I'm just saying, for all of you guys that don't do a lot of research, there are other options that, like I said 10 times already, unfortunately, I get repetitive, I would definitely go flagship display of a lower end model. As we transition over to price, we get definitely thinking to ourselves, hey, I want a larger version of this TV. Where the heck is it? It's up here, I think. Look at you guys. There you go. All right, so there is a lot of competition in these areas, but this is the one I wanted to show you simply because you have the TCL, which was $1,000 at $75, and here you are at Amazon at $1,498. So when we compared the TCL to the 950G or the Hisense to the 950G, if they're going on price point, you know, you don't need to compare the M series. Compare it to a TV that costs the same. Now, granted, it might cost, you know, it might cost that much because of its size. So we'll go and see how much, you know, the other one costs at, you know, 65. Maybe it drops a lot. Yeah, look, so at 65 inches, I didn't even check this before. At 65 inches, this display, which is their entry level, which we already illustrated, doesn't have any of the features that the TCL or the Hisense would have, or the M series would have, and it's $1,000. Just because it's a Sony. And again, if you guys have this display, that's not the intention for me to beat up the display. But I think it's just as important, guys, when you're checking reviews on Rtings. And what I like about Rtings is they do cover not just high-end. We learn almost more in these reviews than we do in the high-end reviews. So, you know, mid-range, I have a mid-range. You're looking at a computer that's got a Sony 900E on it, but you better believe that when the 900F came out, a lot of us were thinking about, oh my God, am I going to upgrade? Well, you come in, you really read between the lines, and you realize, okay, it's not really worth upgrading. It's a great display. But these lower end, lower mid, this is where a lot of people are looking. And they should get equal attention, not just on all channels, but on my channel as well. But the video is really to illustrate that this name, or Samsung, or even LG, we get caught up in the fact that, yeah, they're great brands, but there are better options out there. Now, just to finish up, the TCL 6 series. Now, this isn't the one that you saw, I believe, on Digital Trends at the 75 inches, but it doesn't really matter. Now, if you want to go by these numbers, where with the Sony, everything was pretty much in yellow and red. Now, here we are. If you want to go by these, but what is also interesting is its lowest rank is in design. That is something that is pretty interesting because, again, what do we see on the showroom floor? The majority of people are concerned with how these things look. If it looks cheap, then you're going to ignore it. Just the name itself is kind of tacky in comparison to something like Sony. So the average person does see it. And that's why, guys, people or manufacturers focus on this and viewing angles more than they do picture quality on some of their brands, or lower ones anyway. Picture quality. Full array local dimming. Now it's decent, but it's there. The TV has amazing contrast. It matches any of the high-end TVs we tested. And that's what I want to, again, continue to hammer home, is you can compare these to the highest end TVs in another, and then the price really matters. But TVs in their own price category is where it's dicey. That's where a lot of people will say that don't really watch. I mean, look at the HDR peak brightness. I mean, look at these numbers. They're not even close. But they're the same price. Now, granted, this might be last year's model, but I'd much rather say grab a, one of these last year than the new display. Good upscaling. Color volume's a bit better. Now, they've been known, obviously, for having, not great screen uniformity. But again, that's basis, that's them having, display by display, actual displays. See the motion. It just has the functionality. Dolby Vision. Response time. Response time is actually better. No overshooting transitions. Very good response time. Doesn't mean the TCL is perfect, guys. That's not the point. And the point isn't to say, go grab a TCL. I guess my point is, like we're talking about with the Vizio, is about keeping that open mind and saying, wait a second, these garbage brands or these crappy brands, they have a place too. And I'd rather see you guys get much better picture quality for a much better value. 75 inches, $13.99. Where the 65-inch 900G was $1,000. I mean, that's pretty incredible for what you're getting. I mean, Dolby Vision, 1,000 peak brightness. And again, as if you're catching this review, or not my review, my follow-up, I'll never call them reviews, of the Sony, then it's not meant to put down your display. I'll never do that. Again, just meant to say, we keep an open mind and doing your research into displays like this, where the numbers really are night and day, but the price is the same. So, the 850G is also out. There aren't any there's not a lot of reviews on that, but I know that the 800G was in a lot of Costco's and things of that nature. Back to the Sony 800G. Movies, HDR, gaming. And I know a lot of you say, well, hey, I really want a 75-inch TV. I'll compromise on some of the picture quality to have a larger size. Now, I do agree with, in my opinion, I love immersion and I love large displays. But when you compromise on HDR, you compromise on black level, and you'll see IPS panels with IPS glow and bleeding. Believe me, the largest displays, 80-something inches with bad clouding and no local dimming, trust me when I tell you, because I've seen them, is they're not something that you're going to want. The flaws are very distracting. But the design is better, and that's what a lot of people see. So, again, guys, I don't mean to... No, really quickly here. So, this is what I love what they do here. Its main competitors this year are the Samsung RU7100, the TCL R617, and the Vizio V series. But that is spec-wise. It lines up with these displays spec-wise, not price-wise. So that's something to really keep in mind. Not price-wise, but spec-wise. Actually, no, it's also price-wise. but spec-wise, the TCL still has better features, still has more to offer in terms of things like HDR. Does not have a wide color gamut and cannot get bright enough to deliver good HDR performance. Then again, keep in mind, guys, we are looking for, if you're looking to upgrade from a 1080p display, or you even have a smaller 4K display, just don't get caught up just in this size. There's plenty of displays that are much larger, that have great picture quality, that are cheaper. But there's only so much in a name. And while these Samsung, Sony, they're all great, we have to include those other brands as they do have value. My interest in the Vizio Quantum XP series isn't because it's high-end, it's because I think there's value to the channel and having an open mind about not just chasing these names. The LGs, you know, yes, they have great flagship displays, but when you get into these lower tiers, guys, that's when the TCLs and some of the Hisense and the Vizio M series, P series have a lot of value. Dolby Vision, bright peak performance on, you know, in some other of the other brands they have, you know, TCL has a higher peak brightness. Just keep those in mind, guys. So this isn't a review. This is just an overview of their review, but there's a lot to learn, and you know, a lot of reading between the lines that can really benefit you guys. So when you are looking for these very high-end displays, keep in mind there is so much value in looking at the lower end. I mean, look at these brightness numbers. That's a Samsung of the same class. The TCL, while it's a flagship, don't compare the flagship to another flagship. Compare the flagship at the same price. The TCL is comparable to this price-wise. So that's where the value is. So yes, while I appreciate that Digital Trends and all those guys compare the TCL at 75 inches to a 950G, well, price-wise, we can compare these. Now, the Quantum XP series is expensive at 75, so it is comparable. But, I mean, come on. Why would you want, and this is not what you would want if you wanted HDR. You wouldn't even be able to see it. So that is the point of the video, guys. Thank you as always. I know they're getting long. I will shorten them up as a lot of you guys